Hello, good evening. Thank you all for coming to our third episode of the Spring Mind-Body Healing series. Today's series is F This, Language Shaming the Body with Adolescents in Acute Psychiatry. It's being presented by Adam Reynolds and Jeremy Segall. Adam Reynolds is a drama therapist and social worker and is the clinical manager of psychiatric rehabilitation at Mount Sinai Hospital. Jeremy Segall graduated from the New School with a certificate in creative arts therapy and drama therapy concentration, and also went on to NYU's drama therapy master's program. He also works as a licensed creative arts therapist and works in acute psychiatry at Kings County Hospital Center. Thank you all for coming and have a wonderful night.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out. The title of this presentation is Fuck This. During the course of this workshop, we are going to use and reference harsh language, including cursing, as well as racist, sexist, violent, homophobic, and potentially traumatic images and language. We will do our best to ensure that all such material is used in service of the workshop, and that we will be mindful of its use and impact.
So we're supposed to do introductions. I hate using a microphone. I'd rather shout.
You look really good with the microphone.
But we have to do it for taping. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Welcome to Fuck This. I have to practice swearing again. The last time we did this presentation, I was ready. I spent all day at work, and I've been trying to speak appropriately, and I have to change my mindset. I'm Adam. I am a drama therapist by trade. I'm also a licensed social worker and a substance abuse counselor in the state of New York. I work at Mount Sinai Hospital, where I'm the clinical manager of psychiatric rehabilitation, which is a long way of saying that I run the group therapies in inpatient psychiatry. We have 5 different units covering child and adolescent to geriatric psychiatric inpatients, and we have 14 creative art therapists of all different modalities, art, drama, music, and dance movement therapists who work there and provide really all of the group therapy programming that happens 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I have to look to remind myself of what else I do. I'm also the Associate Training Director at the Institute for Developmental Transformations, which is a particular technique of drama therapy, and we won't talk about it much today, but I will say that my developmental transformations work has definitely informed how I deal with unpleasant, unpreferred, and disturbing material that comes to me in my work every day. And you can read more about it there at developmentaltransformations.com. That's me.
Excellent. Hi, Adam. My name is Jeremy Segall. I am currently working at Kings County Hospital Center as a drama therapist, working on an adolescent inpatient unit with boys. There's 15 beds on the unit. I also, 1 day a week, work on the adolescent inpatient girls unit. Both units serve patients aged 12 to 18 years old, and I also occasionally work on the latency unit, which serves children ages 5 to 11. I'm also a private life and career coach in private practice, and I'm currently the president of the National Association for Drama Therapy's Tri-State Chapter, serving the Eastern region. We actually have our first event this coming February 27th. It's Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. If you're interested in drama therapy, or if you just want to figure out what it is and get to actually be hands-on with it, please look us up on Facebook. Again, it's NADT Tri-State Chapter. There's a group that you can join, so please do so.
So a few things before we get rolling with our PowerPoint. I'm going to ask everybody, if you haven't signed in, try and sign in and put your email on the list here for the new school, because I'm going to bug them to give me a copy of that list as well, and I can email anybody who wants it, some of these notes or this PowerPoint, so you don't have to necessarily go nuts trying to get everything written down. We're going to talk for a little while. We have a presentation, we have a case study that we discuss. We'll have a little bit of an interactive component, but mostly it'll be a little bit of talking. And then at the end, we're hoping to leave some time for people to have questions, and we can discuss the material that comes up and talk about how some of the things we're discussing could be useful to you either in your work or in your studies. I'll be interested to hear where people are coming from, who are students, who are therapists, who are hangers-on, et cetera. That's all the prep stuff, right? Yeah. I can't sit in that chair and see what I actually wrote on the slide. A little bit of a discussion, because you present these things. I gave this topic to Louise like in June, and the topic of our presentation has shifted slightly from when we started. When we began, we were really talking about specifically the use of language with teens and groups, and particularly what would happen in drama therapy where you would be called upon in a role or in a scene to use unpleasant language with children and adolescents, and sort of the kinds of feelings of shame that sometimes came up for me when I was doing the clinical work I knew needed to happen, but I was playing roles and saying and doing things that didn't necessarily feel particularly professional, focusing on that experience that you felt when you were engaging in that language. But over the course of looking at this work, talking about different images that came up in scenes, in language, and art, we began to see parallels between all sorts of unpreferred materials that came up in groups. Languages, bad language, images, narratives, and the responses of the clients and the institutions to that material, as well as our own responses. So not just our own feelings of shame and physical response, but also seeing how institutions, how policies were created in response to this kind of material, and how different clients responded to how people worked with that material.
So if you look up the word unpreferred in the dictionary, it is not there. It's a word that we've been playing with and toying around with. And as we got into this material of unpreferred, there's going to be different ways to respond to it, navigate it. But first we have to describe what it is. So the way we came to is that we started speaking about material that could be thought of as controversial, debatable, uncomfortable, and or sometimes harmful. So unpreferred would be as the antonym of preferred, so to set or hold after or another in estimation, to give priority over to something else, to present for a consultation after the fact, to choose something other than instead, to put behind, to recede or demote to or for another, to opt out and favor another, and to like less. And throughout this, we're going to be speaking about censorship of unpreferred material, and we want to continually debate censorship and look at how it's posted and enforced, all the while being repeated in context varying from official policy formation to informal slang use.
So to begin, this is our interactive component in the beginning. Everybody has a card and a pencil, some writing materials. If you don't, there's some in the back. And before we start to specifically talk about our examples of unpreferred material that comes up that we wish wouldn't come up, material that comes up that our institutions wishes would not come up, material that we want to work with in groups but we feel we don't have the freedom to inside our institutions, we wanted to solicit from the audience your own ideas about either things that are unpreferred for you in your own work with clients, with students, or things that you imagine you might encounter in your work in the future. I don't know if people here are students or therapists, but things that are unpreferred to you. If you're not a therapist, what's unpreferred in your business environment? And so just take a moment. We've put up some of the common unpreferred topics that occur in our groups, but I'm curious to sort of generate some ideas from the audience. So please write them down.
So please take the next minute or two to write down your unpreferred material on the card. Try and write it a little bit big so that your neighbors might be able to see it, because there will be a sharing component to this as well. And recognize how you feel while you start to think about your unpreferred material. Is there a somatic feeling? Are there different thoughts coming to mind, emotions? So please take a moment.
If you're having trouble thinking of something, right, that means something too, right? You can't even imagine. That's the limits of what is unpreferred for you, and you can't even see. Mm-hmm. So it looks like, are we ready?
I'm seeing some faces. Let's give a few more seconds. And if you're just waiting, again, throughout the process of this presentation, we want you to become more self-aware about what your unpreferred material is and why. This isn't about confining yourself to the unpreferred material. It's about learning how to acknowledge it, respect it, and then work around it.
What if your unpreferred material is sharing with others? Gotcha. So let's reveal some of our unpreferred material. Show your cards to each other. Show it to your neighbor. Show it to someone nearby. The way we're seated, people can't necessarily show it across the circle. Notice if the material that they're bringing up is similar to yours, is different. So these are good responses, right? People are clarifying.
They are clarifying. They're talking about it. So again, recognize, are there similar themes around you?
So does anybody feel that they saw something they want to share with everyone? There's a lot of they're
in it. Let's go.
Go.
Let them have it.
It's good. So I don't want to cut down on discussion, but we'll have to come back and get the car rolling again. So did anyone see anything either on their card or someone else's card that was surprising to you? I'm going to come, since we have to use the mic. Now, see, and we're negotiating how to deal with this unpreferred material. What did you...
Neglect.
Neglect, right? That's unpreferred. Anything else that people wanted to share? A drunk Indian? The drunk Indian, like the stereotype. It's real. It's reality, for sure. Anything else?
Well, I wrote the N-word.
The N-word.
So
meaning
again,
nuisance.
Or
neglect.
Neglect.
Right?
I think she means neglect. So what I'm thinking she's saying is the word nigger.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is, for those of you that have come in late, again, we are talking about unpreferred material that we rather hold under or after another, something that we personally do not prefer for different reasons that might shut us down, that might cut us off, or our clients.
You'll notice I didn't put it on the slide.
Interesting.
The N-word.
So again, tonight we're going to be speaking about racist, violent, homophobic material. And it's, can we even acknowledge it in the room? It's already happening. The name of this presentation was already edited, and we'll be talking about different ways to deal with unpreferred material, but also you see it here again. So we'll get there.
Yeah. The interesting story, a tiny story about the N-word, because this happened the last time we gave this presentation, is that I find it very difficult to say that phrase. I don't like to use the word nigger. It's incredibly offensive and racist. But it comes up in groups, and I have to address with my patients what happens when people use that language. And if I'm unable to actually say it out loud in response, how do I deal with that? But specifically, the last time this came up and I was talking about it, I had a friend who was in the front row of the audience who happened to be black. And at one point she goes to me, she goes, "Do you realize, Adam, that every time someone or you says the word in the room, you're looking at me?" And I was. I was looking at her as if to say, this isn't me, And this is how we relate to unpreferred material. We seek reassurance. We seek confirmation at times. We're editing our own responses. We're looking for reassurance that how we're handling it is okay. Which is just to say, as we present tonight, we are not masters of this material. Every day, my clients, 8 years old, 12 years old, 17 years old, bring material to groups that I cannot handle gracefully. And the idea is, how do I get better at handling it gracefully? How do I use it? Yeah. Did you have a question? Wait, don't shut up.
My question is, to unprefer is a verb. Unpreferred is an objectified noun. Mm-hmm. So to unprefer something or someone is an active action, is an action. Whereas the unpreferred is an objectified form. And I'm curious about the distinction between unpreferring, which is active, and unpreferred, which is, in a sense, passive.
It's a beautiful point. She's stealing my thunder.
She is.
Right?
She's jumping the gun.
But no, don't apologize, because this is exactly it. That we can say things are unpreferred, and as a room we have a little bit of consensus, potentially, about what things may or may not be unpreferred. But actively, in our lives, in our work, in our communities, we create what is unpreferred. We decide it together, sometimes without even noticing that we're doing it. Someone says something to me and I miss it. And I just happen to miss the part that they're saying that I don't prefer. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we're trying to work on, and we'll talk a little bit more about, is how we can become more aware of this process by which things are made unpreferred, and how we can work on keeping things in more neutral spaces.
We have some examples from the last time we gave this presentation, which continues to develop due to the faces that end up joining and the sharing of their unpreferred material. So this was actually from our last presentation. This is a direct quote from one of the attendees. "I'm currently working with 2 clients who are friends, and they keep side-talking in group. They frequently call each other fucking fat cunt and other similar phrases. They both say that they are joking and that it does not bother them. I am uncomfortable and the group seems uncomfortable. I am also not sure if the 2 clients that are friends are actually comfortable. Ironically, it seems to happen in my anti-bullying group."
My institution disciplines adolescent patients whom are writing love letters and letters with sexual intent to each other, which is at times age appropriate. Also, staff does not know how to handle LGBTQ populations and treats them differently. The institution becomes unpreferred for me, especially when staff stereotypes patients upon admission before getting to know them. The staff clearly handles butch girls and effeminate men differently.
"The institution is unpreferred for me because they do not want anything dark or negative allowed in groups. The institution wants to keep everything fun. The institution also does not allow confidentiality in groups, even if there is no threat for danger to self or others."
I run an eating disorders group in an agency that does not allow them to talk about food.
The phrase "suck my dick" is unpreferred.
So one of the elements when we were discussing this material initially was a bit of absolutely beautiful work that Jeremy did at Kings County, which I think creates a perfect picture of how this question of unpreferred material can both affect a patient's journey in the institution and how discovering how to engage with it can create changes in treatment.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is an actual case narrative of a patient that I experienced and was able to treat approximately a year and a half ago. During the time of treatment, again, I started to encounter areas that I had not ever really experienced before. And as Adam had just mentioned, this case study is going to highlight areas of unpreferred material from the institution, from I myself, the therapist, and also the client, but also the patients around him in groups. So this patient, and excuse me while I read off my notes, I just want to remain focused because I like to talk. Patient was a 16-year-old Caucasian Uzbekistani male who was admitted to the hospital due to homicidal and suicidal ideation. At the time of admission, he was targeting his biological mother, and they were engaging both verbal and physical altercations. The patient reported that he wanted to kill his mother because she had admitted him to another hospital multiple times, and then he wanted to kill himself. The reason why the patient was admitted previously to other hospitals was because he wasn't following the rules of the community or at home. He was smoking marijuana, he stole money both from his biological mother and stepfather, and he would not attend school on a regular basis, as well as he was aggressive. The patient's mother had him admitted to Kings County Hospital Center with a mental hygiene warrant, and he was picked up at his home by the authorities. Once he was admitted to the unit, he was not responding well to the therapeutic milieu. He was oppositional, he was defiant, and he tested limits regularly. And he also would not engage in treatment and refused to partake in groups, individual therapy, and would not speak to the chief of the unit, the psychiatrist on staff, or his medical residents. As part of his disposition and discharge plan, he was to attend 3 family therapy sessions and a few family meetings. And one thing that I did not mention is that the average length of stay in the inpatient unit, as it is an acute setting, is at that time was 7 to 14 days. Now with state hospitals closing for adolescents, the length of stay has definitely been expanded. But at the time that he was admitted to the hospital, the average length of stay was, like I said, about 2 weeks. He was there for approximately 2 months. So all throughout the process where he wouldn't attend family meetings and stuff like that, his biological mother and stepfather wanted him to still come home, but he refused to meet them off the unit in a centralized programming area, and therefore it elongated his stay. So there are 2 assessments that happen each time a patient comes into the unit. There's an individual assessment that I give as a drama therapist, and then there's the individual treatment team assessment. It's interview style. All the multidisciplines are there. And during both assessments, he reported that he believed in white pride, white power, and followed the neo-Nazi culture. Now, one thing I have to mention is Kings County Hospital Center is a city hospital. It's located in East Flatbush, New York, where most of the patients, as well as staff, are of African American, Hispanic, and West Indies descent. So this Caucasian male coming in not only saying these things about white pride and white power, he was also a minority just because he was white, and they weren't sure how he was going to be received. We also, at the time of admission, weren't sure how immersed into the neo-Nazi culture he was. Well, we found out very quickly. The more that the treatment team, and in the original interview, he was told that he couldn't speak about white pride, he couldn't speak about white power, and the more that the team said he couldn't talk about his beliefs, the more they started to occur. Not only was he verbalizing them on the unit, but he then started to put them on his clothes, desks, and walls. He liked to adorn his jeans with swastikas and quotes of Hitler. And it got to a point where his clothes were acquired and he was given pajamas to wear, and somehow was able to find a marker or a pen. Room searches were always done. He would somehow find a way to get swastikas all over his clothes. It got to a point where he started to reap some consequences and was unable to have other privileges that the other patients were able to experience, such as movies, after groups in school. He wasn't able to go to the gym, and at one point he wasn't able to go to school because he refused to take the swastikas off of his clothes. Throughout the length of this day, as I said, multiple members of the treatment team stated that they believe that he should not be able to speak, write, or draw anything related to the neo-Nazi culture. And as we'll talk about, he was actually a very talented fine artist. So this became a point of contention for me because I believe that there was an appropriate and therapeutic place for this material. Now, as I start to talk more about the unpreferred material, I am a Jew. My family came from Russia, Poland. My grandparents were first-generation American. So most of my family was killed in Russia and Poland in World War II. So the fact that this child is coming in speaking about Nazis is actually unpreferred for me. Obviously, you see it's unpreferred for the unit as well. However, it was never really completely unpreferred by his peers on the unit. Like I said, most of the patients come from diverse, very mixed backgrounds, yet they always engaged with him socially. And the process of him coming to group took quite a while, and I'll talk more about that when I show some of his work. But when he did start coming to groups, actually the patients related to him more. They asked wonderful questions that became beautiful conversation and debatable subjects that we were able to come together to reject as a community, to accept as a community, and more importantly, challenge and ask questions and learn. So many questions were asked in groups. Many people were able to relate to his perspective of displaced anger onto a larger group of people. For instance, I am a white male therapist, and many of my patients consider me white authority or police. So this isn't just coming from him, this is coming from the entire unit. But yet, specifically for this patient, this was being shut down. So then one day, a patient came into what I have is called as a drama therapy open studio. This is during a time of transition when some of the patients are allowed to go up to gym for a physical expression group. I try and create some structure where they can come and write stories, poetry, or draw. And it's a laxed group, but yet it allows me individual time with a bunch of patients in the room where we can share our work. He came in, he kind of slid in a little bit and, sat in a corner, and he was like, "What are we doing?" I was like, "Well, I noticed that you like to doodle a lot," and they took away a lot of his notebooks and stuff as well. And I was like, "You can draw anything that you would like." And so this began our treatment journey and a building of rapport, trust, and safety. This is the first thing that he drew. Now, if you don't know what this is, How do you know if it's acceptable or not? And we're going to talk more about the learning of language and expression later. But this is what he drew, and it allowed for him to open up to me and for me to get to know him more. So on this slide, you see that he's drawn a Schutzstaffel, which is the SIG ruins, Armenian SIG ruins, that stand for SS, which was the protection squadron of the defense corps. It, for him, signified security. He talked all about Nazi ideology and about the SS and Heinrich Himmler, who is famously known for his crimes against humanity. He led the SS into carrying out the Holocaust, or the final solution, or as they called it, race hygiene. As you see, he's written Das Reich, which stands for, it's German for the 2nd SS Division, and they are known for killing the most people. And then there's this thing which I thought was a swastika, which it is not. It's actually called a wolf's angle, or a wolf's hook, or a wolf's anchor. And this symbol stands for the resistance movement against allies that began to cut down and break down on the SS once the World War II started. So I didn't know any of this. So it was not only a great teachable learning point for me to connect with him more, but you began to see some themes outside of what he was presenting as. You see themes of underlying anger. You see things and themes about security and resistance. So this was the beginning of the next step. He started coming to more groups. And I started to meet with him individually, 2 to 3 times a week for 50-minute sessions. So in an individual session, he then drew this. So this 1488 that you see on the top actually started showing up all over the unit, on the walls, on desks. And the more people tried to censor what he said, he got smarter. He was still able to express what he wanted to, but it came out in this number. It came out in the wolf's angle. It came out with this Armenian SIG ruins, as you saw on the last slide. So again, I was able to start focusing on that. So just to speak about it, 1488, the 14 stands for the 14 words in Volume 1, Chapter 8 of Mein Kampf. And that statement, the 14 words are, "We must secure the existence of our people and a future of white children." There's also an amendment to those 14 words which says, "Because the beauty of the white Aryan woman must not perish from the earth." So again, now I get to start talking to him more about what does the role of child mean? Why is mother and this white Aryan woman coming into play? And 88, 8, the 8th letter of the alphabet is H, so 88 means Hail Hitler. So this actually was a breaking point within our process together, because this is what helped me enable to start looking at this expression as role. And from role and from the artwork and character, I was able to bring it up on its feet and create scenes around this. So keep this picture in mind. As you see a Gestapo agent, you see a Jew who's about to be gassed, and more importantly, the gas chamber. These were symbols that I'll speak about later. So from this picture, I then created characters, and from the characters, we gave them, characterological traits, qualities. I was able to learn about what these expressions that everyone wanted to shut down meant. And this is actually not him. This is Heinrich Fritz, a character that he created, who's loosely based off of Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. Now, all of these, again, became talking points that moved toward embodied exercises. Later through the work, we see that he then was able to bring out the character or the role of the Jew. This actually had no title, no name. If you look at the picture, you see that this character is smiling, yet he's about to go to a gas chamber. So you're noticing that there's an incongruence to the affect to what the story he was depicting in the picture. Keep this character in mind. And I jumped too much ahead. So these are the characters that I then turned into embodied scenes. And at one point, I was kneeling down on my knees, about to go be gassed in a chamber because I enrolled myself as the Jew, which obviously kicked up a lot of the unpreferred material. But then we were able to role reverse, where I became the SS member. And then we were able to then give voice to the gas chamber, which became a character. Now, Later through the work, we learn that the gas chamber drawn symbolically represented his mother, who suffocates him. The Gestapo agent was his stepfather, forcing him to follow rules and regimen that he would forcibly fight against because it was not his real father. And in the end, he verbalized that he felt like the Jewish person being put to death. And so all of this material that he started expressing out on the unit was really about his disempowerment. And through this process, through the latent material, came forward the allowance and allowed him to start seeing and understanding his perspective and his experience from a more empathetic place. Excuse me. The Nazi culture he was drawn to allowed him a place to express anger, but also feel a sense of community, which he did not feel he had at home. Now, throughout the treatment, the more he started to process what these characters meant, how his mother came more into this picture, how disempowerment is what really caused a lot of the anger and aggression, frustration, he started to go to family sessions. He started to go to family therapy, and he was later discharged. But before he was discharged, our last group together, I asked him to draw his future. And if you see on this, because I allowed it, because I didn't try to censor him, he was able to work through many of the presenting problems. And notice you don't see anything relating to the Nazi culture there. In fact, he realized that he could join a larger group that would support him, allow him to be himself, but he could fight for a greater good. And was able to also verbalize that he realizes that on the line he could be working next to African Americans, homosexuals, and all different likes of people. So this is just one journey, that dealing with unpreferred material, fighting for it, to allow it to happen in your groups, speaking up for institutions that try to censor not only you as the therapist, but also your client, patient, can actually shut down beautiful therapeutic work that can happen.
I also really just love in that case study the argument that the clients have much more freedom sometimes to deal with this unpreferred material than we do. We're stuck, and these adolescents are able to address some of these issues more capably than we can. And if you can create a space where that can happen. And just concretely, right, the more that this patient was allowed to find an appropriate way to talk about this with a person who could really handle it and contain it, he was able to go to school. He was able to integrate into the program. He was able to go to therapy sessions, and we saw a big difference. In general, the purpose of unpreferred material, to best serve our patients and clients, we have a requirement to become professionally competent in their language and idioms, even if those language and that idioms are uncomfortable for us. The words and images that clients choose in order to express their thoughts and feelings represent a valuable avenue for understanding their histories, their desires, their limitations, and their strengths. We believe that words and images do have the capacity to inflict harm or distress on oneself or others, and that each clinician and each environment must determine what sorts of speech or expression is preferred or unpreferred, and how to respond to it. And that's something that we'll repeat a couple times, because on one level, we're advocating for an interrogation of censorship, but there are some times where you do need to shut down material that's not okay for groups, or you need to shut down material that is actually physically unsafe. Mm-hmm. And it can be very difficult to determine what factors will make it unsafe.
With that said, we also want to highlight that the link between word and wound can be disrupted. Injury by words and images is attributed to a loss of context. Recontextualization of words and images can shift their meanings and the capacity of certain effects. Do we have to attribute to speech and language the force of their deeds? We can allow the performance of the words or expression to change.
So ultimately, the questions that we were trying to answer is, what are the factors that we consider when we're determining what sort of speech or imagery can be tolerated in the therapeutic process, particularly with adolescent patients who are discovering these boundaries for themselves. They're exploring what is okay in their families, in their communities, in their own lives. What might the effects be, positive and negative, of allowing this unpreferred imagery into a therapeutic environment, into your groups, or into a relationship between you and a client? And as I will say probably several times, that there's no single answer as to what sort of unpreferred language or material will be beneficial or useful to allow in every situation, because it relies on a couple different factors. Our proposal is that any determination of what is desired or unacceptable requires consideration of three main components: the skills and comfort level of the therapist or the group leader, the skills and comfort level of the client, the patient, or the group in question, and also the skills and comfort level of the institution. And why, essentially, do we want to let this material in? We want to reflect cultural reality. We want to explore ways to use language and imagery purposefully to help establish boundaries, and also sometimes to make meaning out of overwhelming content, such as turning cursing from a purely somatic anger response into actual speech, and to find out what's underneath.
In relation to the reflecting of cultural reality, generally there's an impulse to rewrite history, and that it is a failure to use descriptions that provide an unnecessarily limited picture of the world, culture, and history. It is a failure to come to terms with reality. On an inpatient unit, the purpose is to reorient the patient to reality, as well as the community where they are originally from. People thirst for rich and accurate representations of the world around them. In relation to exploring the use of language and imagery purposefully, Judith Butler, and we'll be giving references at the end of this, she states, keeping terms and images unsaid and unsayable can also work to lock them in place, preserving their power to injure, and arresting the possibility of a reworking that might shift their context and purpose. And in context of the overwhelming content, words such as faggot, nigger, and pussy, as well as racism, sexism, gangs, rape, and suicide exist in our culture and the world in which our clients and patients live. We are not saying that we should abandon safety on our units, as Adam was saying, by allowing clinical material to spill out. However, in a contained and structured therapeutic group, these words and topics can pay respect to their lives and honor their history, having a healthy and prosperous life, bringing forth greater awareness and competence.
I think our belief is that in therapeutic environments, efforts to control, constrain, and censor speech or expression reflect an overall desire to control and exert power over the bodies and expressions of patients and clients. And sometimes this may be necessary, especially when we're dealing with people who cannot handle their own safety, but essentially that often institutions' response to this unpreferred material relates more to their discomfort with clients' own strength, with clients' own capacity to express themselves. As therapists, I feel our training programs, our classes, workshops like these, they train us really well to know the skill and comfort level that we're experiencing from our clients about this material. We're looking for changes in affect. We're looking for changes in behavior. But to be honest, I think we're less conversant in the ways institutions express their comfort level with this material. And that's very important, because if you don't have the institution's complicity essentially in the work, you won't be able to do the work. They're going to shut you down. And so being able to determine what your degree of freedom is in these moments is crucial. But also how to notice your own comfort level, how to notice what's going on inside your own body, inside your own thoughts when this material comes up in groups, and how can you increase that? Rather than defaulting to either implicit norms, right? This is okay to say, I can say faggot, but I'm going to say the N-word, these ideas that we have socially acceptable. The idea is to become aware of the varying comfort levels with unpreferred material, and that this helps support or suggest ways of integrating the material into the work, editing it to try and sort of shift it to a place where it's a little more productive, or, if necessary, censoring it. There is an exception made for safety. When speech, imagery, or physical action is used as a threat rather than a means of expression, or when the unpreferred material represents an assault on a person's safety, safety has to come first. But even judging this issue of safety can take a real familiarity with your population, with your institution, and with yourself. Can you safely handle the discussion that comes up? We're moving pretty quickly, but my intention ultimately is to get to a place where we can have a conversation about some of these ideas. So if I go quick, please forgive me. But we have a few slides just to look at some ideas about how an institution shows its comfort level with material, such as interruptions. If a group is getting loud, if a group is getting aggressive, I will suddenly have people knocking on my door. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Joe needs his medicine. Do you mind if I pull him out of group? Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, medicine happens a lot on my unit as well in times when it's technically not even supposed to be prescribed. We also notice people coming into the room telling patients to stop doing what they're doing. If they're on a level 1-to-1 observation, if they're still a danger to themselves or others, they will normally be someone that's within arm's length away from them. And they will often, if they're feeling that the material is unpreferred, and they symbolize the institution, they will tell the patient to quiet down, stop doing that.
Increased observation, people looking in the window, people coming in, questions, challenges, official reprimands, which have happened to both of us, helpful suggestions about groups that might be better or ways that you might handle a patient. I don't think you should invite John to group. He seems a little frustrated today. These people trying to head off unpreferred material.
We have some examples of reprimands and suggestions, such as one day I was doing a sound and movement group where they were passing, improvised sound and movements to one another. They had to receive it and then adapt it and change it and send it to their next peer. And right after group, I was asked why I'm running a nipple touching group.
I mean, it seems a fair question.
Yeah,
if that's what you were doing, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, for an institution, I put it last on the bullet, the question of what becomes policy. And for me, policy represents a very particular boundary in an institution. When you make something a policy, that's when you're saying we no longer have to think about whether or not this thing is okay. If it's against the policy, we don't get to decide anymore. And the place I am a little bit of a champion for is I want to keep more material in the arena where we get to decide if it's okay.
Will you tell them about your hitting group?
Oh, well, it's like my pair to your nipple touching group. I've been running developmental transformation groups with children on inpatient unit for almost 5 years now, so hundreds and hundreds of groups. They're often very aggressive. It's free-form, non-directive play, and so they're pretending to fight with each other. And I'll get an email every once in a while going, I was informed by staff that you were running punch each other group again. Of course, this kind of therapy is not allowed here, and we would like to see something. I'm just like, but it's interesting because you can get real shut down by that. That was a hard email for me to get from a person who's a friend of mine. I know that psychiatrist very well. I'm just like, what the
Also, I've been suggested to not run groups sometimes. For instance, I had 2 openly homosexual patients on the unit, which is quite rare. And obviously, I am gay. Hey. It was made as a suggestion to not give treatment to the gay patients. That was their unpreferred material.
And it's a good example because I would say that your institution has a very different comfort level with homosexuality among its staff members than mine does, right? Because absolutely. I am also gay.
Hey.
And I haven't ever heard that from anybody in my hospital, for example, at least to my face. In terms of clients in groups, how might a client or a group show their comfort level with specific material when it comes up? These are more basic. I think these are things that you sort of learn as you're learning how to run groups, as you're learning how to work with clients. A client's level of participation, their range of affect, what kinds of things are being summoned up, communication. They may verbally tell you, I don't want to talk about this. Why are you letting this person say that? Why is this coming up in this group? Proximity, I find, is important for me. People come closer to things that they either are very mad at or that they desire. A client's presence. Sometimes a topic will go somewhere and I notice people are just not so much there. And deflection, denial. People will actually try to dodge things they don't want to deal with. If the material is unpreferred, they will dance far away. And also, how can the therapist monitor his or her own comfort level with material as it comes up? And on some level, this can be undeniable. I was thinking of physical symptoms as one. If my stomach starts to feel a little, something is definitely going wrong in group. Time. I'll notice that I give time to certain things when they come up, and other things I want to move quickly through it. It's clearly a sign I'm not so into what's happening. Familiarity and knowledge. So the truth is, I never thought that knowing the names of Pokemon would be a helpful therapeutic content. But the truth is, it's also true for gang signs, Nazi paraphernalia, rap music. Your ability to become familiar with what's important to your clients can really help you determine how comfortable you are with what's happening.
Can I just Who here, by a show of hands, knows what a $1.50 is?
This was news to me. Oh, so you know? Oh, Jeremy told you. She has
No
the
cheating.
secret. I was like, oh, they were talking about a $1.50. Is that Subway fare? Like, what's that about?
Yeah, so it's important, again, to understand your acceptance or your relation to unpreferred material by understanding your patient's expressions, language. A $1.50, just so you know, is a slit from the corner of your mouth that goes all the way up to your ear and takes 150 stitches. So unless you know what that means and they say, I'm going to $1.50 you in group, is that something that you would even know to censor or edit or allow?
Yeah, people are threatening each other and you might not even know, which also leads into fear. To be honest, sometimes our clients can be frightening. And a client may say something, and if I'm frightened to address it with that client, I'm not going to be able to to engage with it. Shame and embarrassment. The story I was telling about this is I'm having a group and a couple different things going on. I'm talking to these two young ladies, I guess 11 and 12, and I realize as they're telling how they deal with a hard day, like I'm going, these girls are talking about masturbating. And there's a part of me that wants to support these young ladies and like exploring their bodies, but I'm actually turning a little red. I'm thinking about what will happen if they say, like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to have this conversation and how I navigated it, right? How I managed to say something supportive without going into territory where I knew I would start tripping over my own tongue. It was a good lesson for me, a good practice. I insisted on putting laziness here. Dude, sometimes I just cannot be bothered to deal with difficult things that come up in group. I will ignore it. I will just be like, I didn't hear him say that. I'm just moving on. I just don't want to put in the effort. Self-consciousness. There's been times when kids want to bring up queer issues in groups, and I feel like, I can't go there today. It's just too much me. I can't let myself go enough to be there with them. Pride and expectations. I want the group to go well. And if we start talking about being hit by our parents, I don't think it's going to look as nice as I wanted to, and being able to deal with that. Habit. Oh, no, let's just do what I was going to do anyway, not what you'd like to talk about. And also burnout. The truth is that the work of being engaged in the group tires you out, and that eventually you can actually miss things, you cannot quite rise to the occasion. And all these things are things that we can be monitoring and thinking about when difficult stuff comes up in groups. Particularly with this group of people, we were thinking about what skills might you develop in order to better navigate the elicitation, the editing, and censorship of patient expression in therapy and in groups. We talked about language and cultural competence. Are you informed in the stuff you need to be informed about with your patient population? The kid came in and they were talking about how they thought he had a paranoid delusion about being able to write people's names down in a book and kill them. But my familiarity with the comic books that was based on allowed me to inform people that actually was probably not delusional. That's popular culture. That's a series of books he'd been reading.
Same thing with this tongue twister that a patient used to say all the time. They thought it was just mumbo-jumbo gibberish, yet it was a rap song by Big Pun that has a tongue twister in it, and he was just liking the song so much. So he wasn't psychotic.
Skills and method training. So learning how to work in particular methods can give you more tools in your toolbox to address different issues when they come up. And also work on self-awareness and self-development, whether that's meditation practice, physical work, so you're more relaxed in your body, but any kind of work that helps you know more about yourself, such as pursuing artistic work and expressive work to help you sort of be more aware of your own place, your own body.
Know your own place, and also, again, in relation to this presentation tonight, know your unpreferred material. Get to know it. If it becomes, a habit that all of a sudden you start avoiding a certain topic in your groups or in your sessions, find out the root source. Find out why. It's just acknowledging it, respecting it, saying it's there is the first step, and then learning about what you want or how you want to navigate the unpreferred material will actually be the next part of our presentation. So before I go here, it's common that institutions and therapists assume that young adults are innocent victims in need of protection and overlook the potential for an educative, agency-building situation in which they can learn that they are capable of confronting and changing the language and perception that names them. In a misguided attempt to protect them, the act of censorship risks their well-being and intellectual development. So first we speak about censorship, censoring the unpreferred material. Censorship is shutting it down. Censorship is cutting it off. It's an ethical decision, not simply one of preference or taste. Censorship can be understood as an acknowledgement of harm and as a good faith gesture to prevent future transgressions. Suppressing parts deemed objectionable on moral or political grounds can force the repression of ideas, impulses, and feelings that may be healthily adapted. Censorship can also prevent the implementation and integration into consciousness the original, undisguised forms of expression. So first we look at avoidance. Avoidance, who here hasn't avoided something at some point in their life because it made them feel uncomfortable?
But avoidance is essentially, in a group setting especially, can be a form of censorship. So if someone is saying, can we talk about the food? Can we talk about the food? And you're saying, no, I'd rather not. We're going to avoid that topic. Essentially, you're shutting down something that could be happening.
We then have redirection. Redirection is, oh, don't do that, or do something else. You know? We also have ignoring.
Basic, plain old ignoring. I have to say, and the trick is, we're not judging censorship. Sometimes it's not what the group needs to go to a particular place. Or if the group went there, maybe you're going to face repercussions, or the clients could face repercussions from the institution. So sometimes censorship is the right choice. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if a child or an adolescent is cursing in a group, and I know that I probably should try to help him communicate better, and that's in my long-term goals for this patient, but I want to hear what he has to say. I think the group can handle what he has to say, so I ignore it. I don't sit with that part of the preferred material, and I focus on something else that's going on, and that can take you in a better direction.
Rationale for censorship is that one can assume there is a paternalistic instinct or measure to protect. With a population that already harnesses transference for paternalization, the first response may be to censor. So ask yourself, what are you protecting? What are you protecting them from? What is harmful and unsafe? Get to know your unpreferred material is what we continue to say. We want to censor harm, not individual words and expressions. We cannot control what other people may say. However, we may help guide the way it is perceived or accepted. The result of censorship causes every story to be read literally, leaving no allowances or room for metaphor, simile, or illusion. It stalls the representation of the world in a creative way. Furthermore, it literalizes speech, denying ambiguity, and shades facts of your patient's experiences. We there move on to editing. Editing, instead of removing or censoring words that can jeopardize the stability of unpreferred material, you can point toward new ways and possibilities of claiming them. It gives patients the opportunity to engage with contested material and to rework them. Through editing versus censorship, patients can begin to explore, investigate, interpret, translate, and reshape for further alteration to understand and accept deeper processes. So we have examples of editing such as clarifying, allowing them to continue to talk about it, to therefore allow, just as you guys filled out your unpreferred cards at the beginning of this, there was a lot of discussion around it. We allowed it, or we edited, or allowed to clarify. Challenging. Challenging is what happened a lot with the case study that I presented. We challenged him on a lot of his ideology. And that actually allowed him to furthermore find a place for it to settle where it could at least be rejected or accepted as a whole, increasing group cohesion.
Challenging also, I think you can challenge people to try and say it a different way. If a kid's saying, fuck the hospital, I just want to fuck the hospital. I'm like, okay, I can tell you're upset. Give me more. What do you really want to do to this hospital? Mm-hmm. And eventually, we can get away from cursing language, which is usually not so helpful for the group, and get to, I want to knock this hospital down. I want to get out. I want to rebuild this hospital so everybody has their own room. Suddenly, you're automatically getting into areas where you can actually start working on things that could be helpful. Which is also interesting. That relates to reframing, right? This idea of maybe you can take the energy, the shape of something that could be unpreferred and see, can you give it a reframe? Can you try and help bring it into a different perspective that helps them address it better? Delaying. I mean, we can go through all these pretty quickly. Sometimes I delay. Sometimes someone drops a bomb in the group, and I'm like, I need a minute to think about that. Give me a second. Let's all sit and think about that. I want to see, do we really want to go down this road? Is that really what you're asking to talk about? maybe, and that's a good one for my own comfort level. I need to delay. I'm not sure I'm ready. And so I use that as a way of sort of editing the moment to try and move into a different place.
And often with delaying as well, allow the pocket of silence and stillness to happen in the room. And it will therefore allow them to begin to clarify, to begin to say more about it so you can get to the next step of what they're actually expressing.
Interpreting. So sometimes a client may not have the words, the language, the imagery to really say it better. I mean, this can be a real problem with adolescent clients, especially if they don't have the language or the imagery to really say what they mean. And if you know the client well enough, you can help interpret with them. You can help them find better language. You can interpret. Mm-hmm. Reflecting, I put that under, reflecting is different than mirroring, which I put under allowing. This idea of like a reflection is not identical. So someone gives you some information that you're taking in and you reflect and you're like, when you say that, I'm reflecting this back at you in a way that's slightly shifting and see if they take it. Sometimes they bite. Sometimes they want to push in a different direction.
And these last two actually came after our first presentation of it. Reflecting and shaping is a development of other ways that we're starting to learn that you can edit.
Yeah. And the truth is, these are our verbs, the verbs we started with, just ways to think about these three basic impulses when you're dealing with material that is unpreferred to you or the institution. But there are probably a million verbs. I wonder what verbs would be created by an art therapist. What interventions and words would be used by a music therapist? Would you harmonize with the client? Would you improvise in a different way? And I think the idea is to find a language and a shape that's working for you and that helps you deal with the material. In terms of allowance. Allowing unpreferred material that we often want to censor can honor our patient's history, progress, struggle, and experience. Allowing material that can be constituted as bad or wrong, which could feasibly be censored, can be an avenue for social change. Rather than deleting words or radically altering them, we can allow them to adapt, change, and possibly affect others in a positive way. It can allow the patients to better understand themselves with a clear, uninhibited, and unedited reflection, which can leave space for resignification. Their identity, as well as their expression, can take on new meanings and new contexts, or be contested in ways that disjoin the power of harm. So we look at allowing as amplifying. Well, I was thinking, when I think about allowance, I always think about sound. Sound and noise is so unpreferred by my acute inpatient institution. I'm playing with mentally challenged, disturbed 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. All they want to do is scream. They want to make so much noise. And sometimes I want to allow it. I want to amplify it. I want to be louder when it's right. Sometimes, and other times I just tolerate it. And sometimes I will ask them to edit it. But sometimes you want to amplify it. Sometimes material may be unpreferred for the client, and you think it might be good for them to put it in the room, and you're like, wait a minute, say that again. Say that louder. What you just said. Say that to her. Say that to the group. You can amplify that material.
Tolerating is something that we were talking about also. To learn and tolerate about your patients is to allow it. If they're just going to say fuck, fuck, shit, fuck over and over again, maybe that's all that they know how to say at this point. Maybe because they're teenagers and they can't even define their emotions or identity at that time, maybe that's how they express themselves. But can you allow the words to happen, and can you allow them to transition, to change? Tolerating is a way that I've really learned what really is behind boredom, what's really behind anger and hate, and what's actually behind a lot of the rap songs that these adolescents are listening to.
Accepting and acknowledging, I was just thinking about how often I don't like to accept the lives that my clients have lived. And when they are in group speaking and behaving that comes from a place, especially a culture of violence and of abuse, of crime, of poverty, that my desire to shut it down, my desire to change it, my desire to not have that be in my beautiful group is about not wanting to accept their histories, about not wanting to accept that that's true for them. And so being able to take in as much as I can, as much as is safe, as much as is useful, helps me in terms of dealing with this material and really getting to know the clients, getting to know them.
Acknowledging, going off of what Adam was just talking about, as we said, there is abuse, there is neglect, there are rape and faggots and niggers all around, and we have to accept that this is part of their culture and that this is part of their story. And the more we acknowledge it and the more we allow it into the room, we get a better sense of our clients and patients, but more importantly, how to meet them where they're at, how to help them, how to support them, how to allow them to start to know safety and trust so that they can begin a whole new realm of treatment that they were inaccessible to before.
A lot of that also, I think, in inpatient environments becomes about acknowledging really difficult truths about why people are there. So we were talking about, like you were saying, in the case study, we talked about a client who was not allowed to create art that was about his white supremacist imagery. But I've dealt with a lot of situations in the hospital where they're trying to shut down patients' art about wanting to kill themselves. That's why you're in the hospital. The people who are helping you at the hospital can't acknowledge why you're there. And to really struggle to do that, because it can be difficult to accept, it can be difficult to allow. But if you can't acknowledge the difficult things the client is trying to tell you, how can you have a conversation?
My institution doesn't want to acknowledge that gangs exist in East Flatbush, New York. They don't want to believe that a 12-year-old cannot be part of a blood or a gang, or Crips, I mean. So it's about, do we allow gang signs on the unit? No. Should it be spilling out on the unit? No. But can there be a safe therapeutic place where it can be contained within groups that we can learn about it, to understand that many of the children that are in these gangs are there because they do not have a family or a support system, and they feel loved more by their gang than their own family. Yeah. And then that is the next step to open up into further therapy.
And in terms of gang stuff especially, this is where the issue of safety comes up a lot in an inpatient unit. I'll often ask a client, so if a client is making a gesture or saying a code word, and I don't really know if it's a gang signal or not, and I'm thinking to myself, should I shut this down? The policy says no gang signs. But I'm saying to myself, I'll ask the client, I go, if I made that gesture, would I be safe in your neighborhood? If I said that to someone in your neighborhood, would I be safe? It's great what they do. They look at me and they're like, "You what you talking about? You can't say that. You don't can't make it with your." But that's the way I start to begin to have this discussion about safety and allowance with teenagers, where I say, remember, some people in this group may experience that as a physical threat, because if someone did that to them in their home neighborhood, that would be as good as saying, "I am going to kill you," which I said looking at you. I apologize. And we begin to have a dialogue about safety that I think is more meaningful than saying no gang signs. I always ask the hospital, I'm like, where's the gang sign expert? Because I have to say, I am 100% sure that these teenagers are saying and doing things that I cannot interpret every minute of my group.
I try and stay up as much on gang signs. Go on YouTube, you can see how they're done. You can learn what is really a gang sign, what is a greeting, and what's really going on. And often I'll edit it or I allow it, where I will also try to do it and pretend, but I will also mess it up on purpose.
Yeah.
I also sometimes try to deem it as corny or cliche, and then all of a sudden it stops.
I did a whole group where me and my co-leader did drama therapy gang signs to try and communicate with each other. And it kind of worked. We were so desperately uncool, they moved to a whole new territory.
And then there's also mirroring, which is kind of what Adam and I were just talking about a little bit as well, reflecting back to them what we see and allowing them to also see themselves in a way, to identify off of another, having it reflected back. Are you willing to trust that even a teenager who expresses, embodies, uses words and images of unpreferred material, and experiences and faces unsavory circumstances are able to hold themselves, represent the world in which they live, and are able to learn and work through their, at times, limited scope of how the material is used? As a clinician, you can raise the integrity of your groups, skill, and experiences your patients have by empowering them to take control of how they receive information and how they are personally received by others. By allowing unpreferred material in the room, an implicit examination occurs that allows repetitions to be challenged and exploration to be had. Communities can come together over a collective rejection or acceptance of material. Don't allow the material to limit the individuals, especially with adolescents who developmentally are trying to explore and understand their own identities. This is the beginning of it for them. If you're going to shut down, in drama therapy terms, the role that they know how to play, how are they supposed to learn about other roles? How are they to begin integrating new qualities, new experiences, new roles, if we don't even allow them to have what they have? This is a time to get past that block, not only for you as the therapist, the block of the institution, but also the block of the client by somewhat allowing this unpreferred material in. And again, I want to highlight again that the censorship, the editing, and the allowing of unpreferred material is not just from the therapist. This happens within patients, this happens within institutions, and you can use these three avenues that we've begun to kind of explore a little bit for all three.
I mean, essentially, the component that we said, like our kicker, is that this unpreferred material isn't what we need to get rid of to get to do the therapy. Dealing with this material is the work of therapy. These are some references we worked in. Judith Butler and Diane Ravitch are two very linguistic theorists who talk about the use of language, the power of words, the substance of imagery. And they talk a lot about censorship. A lot of their writing is about censorship in educational settings, like textbook editing and how what you let into the textbook becomes the dialogue of the classroom. But we really found that their material was very clear in this kind of work too, in terms of therapeutic material.
I also have a list of related articles in media. So if you've written down your email or a contact that we can get hold of, not only can we send you a packet of what we've talked about tonight, but also those references to further explore what word, what expression, what images mean to you as the therapist, but also your clients.
Thank you.
How are we on time?
We're good. We have about 15, 17 minutes, which is not quite as much as I'd hope for questions, but pretty good. I want to say before we do anything in specific, just to sort of repeat the boilerplate text, that Jeremy's and my theories and statements, they come both from our methodology, the way we've been trained, the way we approach the work, and also the environments in which we work. And so based on your personal comfort level, your orientation, your setting, where you are in your career, the choices you make in every moment must be different, should be different. And so nothing we're saying here, nothing in our case materials is meant to be a prescription, a real a rule of how to do it. And we acknowledge that we lean a little bit on the allowing side of things. We're seeing ourselves a little bit as anti-institutional and trying to promote dialogue, but in other settings and in other times, those impulses are good too. Right. But we're open to whatever questions people would like to ask. We have a little bit of time, so I would only ask people to be targeted, so we have as much time for as many people to speak as who want to.
Please, yeah, for the
No, you do, because so you're on the tape. Uh-oh. The mic is
You said you liked
unpreferred.
performing. Get used to it.
I feel as though sometimes in this culture and this generation now that things are changing, like things that are unpreferred are more preferred now, like in school, like in junior high school and high school, like they would curse in the gangs, like it was normal, and the rap music and everything, and everybody could relate to it, but I feel like it's more unpreferred to talk about religion or like what happened in September 11 or Jesus Christ or Mohammed. And I feel like they always try to shut it down, and I feel a lot of censorship on that, and I personally don't like that. And I feel like that's something that really bothers me, because I feel like you could learn more about other people's cultures and about their religious beliefs and accept more and learn more about them.
I think a lot of the time, religion, politics, in my setting ends up being surface material at times. It's sometimes a way they know that it's either going to be shut down or they know that it's unpreferred and it's not going to be spoken about, so that they don't have to actually talk about their own lives. So they don't have to be a protagonist to their story, because it's easier to create some type of chaos or debate over Catholicism or rape or gangs and things like that. So again, this presentation is about learning about why it's unpreferred for you. I know on my unit, there's one nurse who cannot stand, she's African American, cannot stand the word nigger or nigga, and yet nigga is on every radio station right now. It's in television. So I agree with you. I think everyone has different tolerance and levels of acceptance of unpreferred material. But again, we want to get to the point of understanding why is it unpreferred for you, and how can it actually activate or aid your clients in their own expression.
You're right, though, that it's a moving target, right? Like what is unpreferred changes from moment to moment and from setting to setting. And so it's good to keep your eye on it, because I think there are a few things that are very unpreferred that we don't know about. They're under the surface. We only know when they perk their head up and suddenly everyone gets anxious.
We have a comment and a question. The comment is that on our unit, some of the staff are constantly being told that our language, that because we think, some of us feel like we can relate to the kids because we're more street or ghetto, which I hate that term, and that some staff feel that that's inappropriate. We feel, some of us think that's a way for the staff to relate to the kids. You know, if you come from a certain area and you know what it's like to live the way that they've lived, okay, well then you got to use that. And it's not like the hospital's giving anybody any training on how to be a counselor anyway for the staff that are not professional staff. The question we have is how many kids in general do you have in a group at any time when you are, you know, when you feel that it is okay to allow certain material?
For me, again, I feel it comes back to rapport and really knowing the presenting problems of each and every patient. It's really individualized to each group, not only for what the therapeutic directive is going to be, but again, in my hospital tomorrow, I'm going to be running 3 groups. We have 15 beds on the unit, and I'm the only therapist on tomorrow. So I could have potentially 15 patients in my group tomorrow. So again, the thing is that you as the leader get to say who's group appropriate, who's not. And in an acute setting, you're going to have patients that are actively psychotic and symptomatic, so they're not always going to be group ready, so you know that this wouldn't be appropriate for them. In commenting on your ghetto or street talk, that is how I relate to the patients. I listen to rap music and hip-hop music not only because I like it, because it's a way for me to understand them. I know what an L is. I know what an onion is. I know what a cake is. Do you all know? Most of the people on my unit don't know either. I learn by listening to the music and asking them about it and allowing it. And then also saying, is that socially acceptable? Going off of what Adam said before too. Is that safe? Is it acceptable for you to use this on the unit? Because the unit is a microcosm for the world that they live in. So are you okay to say that? And just so you know, an L and an onion is weed, different volumes of it. A cake is a female's arse. Yeah.
One of the interesting things about, I think, hidden in that question about the size of the group, if you look at like what's allowable in an inpatient psychiatric group, which is going to be generally between, let's say, 5 and 12 people is an average, depending on your population. What you can do with 6 people, what you can do with 8 people, it's very different when you think of someone who's working in a classroom. You're working with 24 people. What you can allow, what you can tolerate, because what can you actually take in? If there are 24 people talking at once, you can't allow the same kinds of things that you would allow if you have 7 people that you know very well, you know their histories, you know what's brought them to the hospital. And so I think that's a great question in terms of really putting your lens on what's okay. And so I'll know if I'm going into a group with 12 kids, I cannot tolerate the same things I can tolerate if I have a group with 5. Because my capacity is greater to give the attention to it. And that's knowing your own limits, your own comfort level. It's a great observation.
I think the senses of groups, like you said, is a great observation. And also, it's timing for me. I have, right now on my unit, I have 2 religiously preoccupied patients. One believes he's Jesus, and the other one believes he's Muhammad. Ooh. So if I'm going to have them both in group, and they begin to... It's kind of fascinating. Am I going to allow them to not only speak and work through their delusions in group with each other? No, you have to clarify what safety is and what's acceptable for each group. And for me, my unpreferred material continues to change as well. You know, that to me is unpreferred. I don't want them getting into an argument over religion in group. And also a safe way to do that is to create directives. I'm a drama therapist, to create drama therapeutic directives that will steer away from that type of material if they can. But there's a time and place.
Oh, I got it.
It sounds like in a way sometimes your clients and you as a therapist have a common enemy in the institution. And I was just wondering, what do you do with a patient or a client whose role, whose identity needs to have something to fight, needs to be censored?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to do DVT first? Like, I find like the whole idea of the victim and the perpetrator that comes up in DVT often is interesting. I'll speak for myself. Never mind. I believe, yes, there's a place for that to be played out. And if that's what they're calling to, again, if that makes me feel uncomfortable, that they feel they need to be censored or doing things that I might want to censor, I want to find out why it's happening. I want to find out where it's coming from. But I also want to find, in drama therapy terms, what that counter role is. So if there is this person that needs to be perpetrated and needs to be abused or needs to be shut down a lot, I also want to find out what's on the other side of that so that it can be more healthily balanced and integrated.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I think the question is, like, if you're aware that this is a dynamic that's playing out, then you can start to address it, both with the client and with the institution. And so in team meeting, I might be going, have we noticed that this person is actually getting themselves into trouble? Maybe clamping down on them is actually reinforcing this. Maybe we could try something different. And also then figuring out ways to address that with the patient. And drama can be helpful in that, role reversals and these moments where they get to play the institutional impulse and you play the rebel and they see how annoying it can be or whatever happens. But this idea of trying to bring mindfulness to the process, because we all have relationships with institutions, positive, negative, and you pointed out, right, this is our relationship with the institution. We like to be the rebels. We want to be the provocateurs. We know that a little bit. And so I can at least be aware, okay, now I'm working in alliance with the institution and now I'm not. And if I can help bring some enlightenment to the client about where they are with that dynamic, that can be helpful too.
And what's really great about creative art therapy of all different modalities is the distance of it. So if they really need to do things that they feel they need to be shut down with or that they are getting shut down for, there's ways to appropriate it and allow it into group where it isn't as explicit, as aggressive, through distance. I mean, through role. I mean, you could do soap operas, you can do other characters. I mean, you can do silent movements, you know, which allows the body and all the emotional expressions within that to be released as well. So I feel grateful that we are trained in this modality to allow more than what some other verbal therapists may not be able to do.
Did you want to say something? Oh, theater sports. Yeah, it's a technique of bringing all this stuff into play, essentially. Yeah. Are there other questions?
Yeah, over here. Hi.
Hi.
I'm just curious from my own experience and wondering maybe if you guys have had the similar experience that I feel like I come into a situation and I feel sort of that I'm looked upon as elitist because I haven't had that kind of difficult life experience. And I always find that that's kind of a difficult hurdle for me personally to get through to a client and kind of meet them where they are. So I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
I was thinking that about you. I was watching you tonight thinking, that girl in the end, man.
That scarf
she
gives
has
it away.
She has it all together. She's so above this. Yeah.
Hold on, can I just, what you just said I think is key. We all have our trials and tribulations, and I think that that's something personally I hope you own for yourself. And you don't have to prove that to the clients or the institution. You have to accept who you are first to be able to accept and acknowledge others around you. But say what you're going to say, I'm sorry.
No, I don't even. But yeah, I think there are a couple ways to look at that. And so some of that is about what people are unpreferred to us, right? And so if someone looks at you and says, oh, you're a person who doesn't have my experiences, and so you are an unpreferred white lady, or however you're being read by the client. And then also to see how you take that in. Because that's also the separation from the client that they are trying to make you feel, right? They think, please don't you can't help us, don't even try. And how do you deal with that sense of discomfort? Because who likes to be rejected right upon first meeting? It's awful. But that dialogue never ends. And I find that you allow that. That's unpreferred content to you. If someone says, you don't know my experience, you acknowledge that. You say, yeah. It's true. I think our lives have been very different. Can you tell me more about yours so I can learn?
And you could also, going back to some of our allowances, like, you know, amplifying, acknowledging and stuff like that, amplify it. Yeah, I'm that white chick. I know all white things. I come from the Upper West. I mean, the idea is, great, bring it into the room, make it more alive for yourself. Do what you have to do to accept it more for yourself.
Sometimes, yeah, if you amplify it, right? Well, that's true. I'm only here, you know, I'm an heiress. This is my charity work.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys should just go about your business and I'll just sit here or whatever, right? That's an amplification. That's a very playful adaptation. That Jeremy and I both come from a world of drama therapy where that is very much the preferred technique. Not everyone's going to have that intervention in their pocket. You may find that it's easier for you to deal with it in a different way, but the trick is not to let it shut you down. You have so much to offer. You have something to offer, and you have to discover that with them.
Be a true mirror and reflection of yourself for your clients. You own yourself and your material, and see what comes up for it. They could keep saying it. The more you get shut down by it and the more you don't talk about it, the more there can't be a transition or a change, not only for you, but for them.
Well, and if you don't address it, there's the chance it's true, right?
Oh. Any other questions?
They're very obedient. It's actually 5 of 8. We're very early.
Well, we also want to be good about time, and we thank you all for coming. And I'm not doing a quick closure yet, but I would like to thank Dr. Luis Montello and the New School University for not only having us, but for also allowing this presentation to happen. The name scares many people away. And I think it's an important topic that obviously could be continued to be talked about over and over again. And we hope that this is just the beginning of the dialogue. And then you continue to become more self-aware clinicians, have more integrity over yourself and your clients' histories, and be more allowing in general.
I also would say, right, think about your own comfort level with speaking in front of the whole group. Many people for whom that is very unpreferred. So if you have thoughts and ideas and responses to this material that you want to share with us, with each other, with your friends, with your classmates later, do so. Find the right place for you to address it, to bring it up, to carry it to the next place.
And as Adam was saying, if you feel uncomfortable speaking in the group about this material, have further questions, again, please write down your email, have contacts. We will hopefully get a list of that. And if you would like, you can request our references, our packet of information, and we'll have our personal addresses there as well if you want to reach out individually.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Don't stop. Keep going.
Oh, no. That's really it.
Thank you so much. This is being videotaped, so I will be able to hear and see the whole presentation.
All the beginning things where we said terrible things about you.
Oh, I bet. Well, I can handle it because I'm one of those chicks. You know what I mean? Whatever that means. So thanks, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Adam and Jeremy. I don't know, Jeremy, if you told everybody that you were so different back then.
I want pictures.
Oh dear, yes, that was very, very different. But I've allowed the true person to
wore his heart on his sleeve, and now his heart is, I don't know. I mean, it's still there.
Where is it, Louise?
Where is it?
This is going in a very strange direction. Now it's cold and dry.
It's gone.
No,
it's professionally boundaried. Let's right.
That's a good one.
It's good.
That's the thing. When you're a therapist, you need to have boundaries, and you need to be adult.
Yeah.
Right? We need to be adults, and even though we're really not, right? That's the great thing about being a creative arts therapist, is that you can have your child so alive in every day of your life, in your work, and we never get old, right? Creative arts therapists live forever. And they never look old, and they're always wacky, and it's a really great lifestyle. So I hope you'll continue taking classes here at the New School. If you haven't started, please do let me know if you're interested in joining up for the program. How many of you are not New School people? All right, great. Well, next week we actually have a presentation on mindfulness in education, taught by an incredibly wacky woman, brilliant woman. She's written many books. She is one of the best loved teachers here at the New School in Parsons School of Architecture. So I hope you'll come back next week and experience her work. She is so cutting edge. So thanks again, Adam and Jeremy.
Thank you.